What's up, everybody? This is Decentral Lens. I am Blutoshi, and on my right is Disco. What's up, Disco? How you doing?
Uh, I'm doing well. I'm captivated by the eyewear. I thought that I always had an interesting look on the glasses, but you definitely took the cake with that. So excited to kind of recap with you some of the stuff because I know you made a voyage down to Tennessee, so it'll be interesting to kind of hear some of that stuff for sure. I'm very pumped for the show.
Yeah, Nashville was an absolute blast, and I got to meet so many of the people that we've been chatting with and DJing with on. I was going to say Twitter, but on the X. But yeah, so I wanted to. The Billy glasses were a very nice touch. Good job, Bongo, and the whole Billy team for making these. And they had these nice. I went to the Bongo meetup at Ord House, and they have these nice. Like, I'm not a big T-shirt guy. Or cheap t-shirt guy. This is like a nice soft knit t-shirt with stitching of the Billy. So, if you're going to have a runes and we're going to round trip everything from a billion back to zero, we might as well have the shirt. But great party, Billy. It was nice to meet a lot of you guys, and Nashville was just awesome.
Wow. I'm excited to dig in and hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where do we start, Disco? Do you want to start with Nashville, or do you want to go? Do you
Well, I
want to
didn't know
start
if we were
elsewhere?
going intro or not. I didn't know if we were going intro or not, but if we want to just go and roll, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. Obviously, there are kind of it's interesting because you have these events, right? And they serve really well to pull people together, kind of IRL where you've developed relationships and communications over time prior, but seeing people in real life is a whole different thing. But we also know from some of these events that it's more so, kind of finding people that you're interested in outside of kind of the convention hall. And I want to learn more about kind of some of the things that you may have come across there. And we can also talk, of course, about, I hate to say the macro of it, but kind of the macro of the event, because there was certainly news that came out of it. It was one of the first times in my life where I was seeing mainstream media cover, a crypto convention to the degree it did. So that represented kind of a sea change for sure.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much to cover there, but you're right. There is kind of two buckets. There's the personal bucket of the ordinal space and kind of the ordinals tribe, and then there's the much bigger, RFK, obviously Trump, and then the non-news of Kamala Harris not going, which is still, I think, huge. But you know what? Let's do that
Yeah.
opening, and then we will get right into it.
Welcome to Decentral Lens, your weekly 30-minute crypto report with your hosts, Blutoshi and Disco.
All right, we've shortened the intro big time, but we still, we still liked it. We still want to do it, but we're gonna call it. This show won't be a half hour. It's probably an hour. And remember, it is also on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music,
Nice.
YouTube. So go there, like it. But we're not just here because sometimes, like I talk to a lot of people in Nashville, Disco, and you and I even know this. Like, we've got this beautiful
Mhm.
studio. We love talking about crypto, ordinals, runes, macro, and everything. But as cool as video is, and we get the little pink moniker to the far left, it's not. The downside right now is it's not something you can just sit and hang and watch. Like, so we are in all these other places, but I think like audio spaces where they do have listenability afterwards, and a lot of them get double and triple the numbers. The video kind of like disappears after that, but just know this is a weekly show. We generally do it on Wednesdays, and it's everything crypto and tying everything together, weaving the fabric from macro all the way down to Billy and awesome degen runes. So we're here for it. We hope you're here for it, and if you like it, tell your friends, and LFG.
Yeah, and just a little add on to that, I also look at it as a bit of a not therapy, but a bit of a catharsis, as we as we navigate the timelines and the news cycles and everything. It's like, oh God, I got to save it for the show. Oh, that's interesting. So, it is definitely an independent passion play at this point, and we're looking towards the future. And I do believe there'll be more and more of a more and more opportunity for video to be consumed in different ways as we go. So that's kind of where we are from that backup. But wow, what would you say? What would you what would you describe kind of the energy level, in Nashville last week? Like what was kind of I don't want to go vibe, but what was kind of the feel for it?
Yeah, so we'll start with the individual. Like I met so
Yeah.
many cool people. Obviously, Scribe and I did a show with you for months on RSIC, and we met so many cool people in that space. B-Ways, Speed Racer, my God, Bad Brothers. Like so many of the people were there. Good Things, Polymath. I like if I had to name everybody, I know I'd forget someone and be bummed about it, but I'll probably just keep name dropping the whole time because I think when you go to these events, especially when ordinals and runes are crabby to down bad right now, it probably didn't get as big of a turnout as it would have if we were just completely in a bull market. So, Scribe and I and Stephen Miller, another one of my absolute favorites, we went to the inscribing event which started the day before, and it really
Okay.
made a huge conference full of 20,000 Bitcoiners. It brought the 100, 200, 300 of us, maybe 400 tops together. So it's kind of like my analogy is like you went to a huge college like University of Minnesota or something. There's like 100,000 people there. Like this is like, well, okay, you're in a Magic the Gathering club or a Pog club, or dare I say you're in like a fraternity. It makes the whole thing smaller, and it makes the experience so much better. In our last breakfast, Scribe and Steven and I talked to mainstream Bitcoin conferencers, super
Right.
nice guys. And they were like, well, your stuff is just spam. It took me like 30 seconds to dismantle that whole thing and be like, well, yeah, some of it is garbage, but a lot of it is immutable information online. What if there's something that the government changes their stance on and then they literally whitewash what's happened in the news? Like that's immutable on Bitcoin. And they're some of the greatest generative artists on Bitcoin as well. And they were like, I mean, it took me 15 seconds to tell them. They were like, well, we don't have that much conviction on it. And these guys were awesome. But my point is, with
Yeah.
all these ordinals people coming together, under what Casey built, and Aaron and Raf and all these awesome people, and Trevor, who I met, who's a super nice guy, like super helpful, and said he wanted to come on, our show and a show with Scribe.
Nice.
Like, so people I hadn't met before who are kind of in different collections and camps, like I met, and you meet people in real life, and they're just most people. Like there was a couple people who have big followings. I'm not going to say who they are because most people probably know, but there are definitely some arrogant folks. But the vibe was generally across the board, like awesome to meet you. And we can talk everything from Bitcoin mining to macro stuff all the way down to ordinals and runes. And that's what differentiates our tribe and everyone probably here listening from everybody else. We can talk about Bitcoin and crypto from top to bottom, from art and runes and pure degen all the way up to macro and energy consumption and energy capture and replacement of like oil as an asset. Like, so
Wow.
it was awesome from that standpoint.
Yeah, and that's got to just feel good because it's one of the things that happens to at least me, but I'm sure anyone listening, where it's like you just want to talk about this stuff and you want to be able to not like bring someone up to speed necessarily or this or that. So when you can just kind of sit at a table or whatever and catch up with someone who you've followed or connected with through spaces or tweets or anything, and then be able to be like, okay, dude, I don't have to explain to you what I mean by this or why I'm so geeked up on this. Like, let's go. So those sort of things are. It's got to be a really kind of just vibey and exciting conversation as opposed to like, so how much do you really know, when you're trying to
Yeah.
kind of like filter that stuff with someone who may say they're into the space.
Well, and also like I met, I've always prided myself on not being friends with like mainstream normies. Not that I don't hang out with them and, play golf with them or play softball or whatever, but like when you meet people like Snooptoshi, this guy is literally a walking quantum computer. His interests are all from AR. Like he showed us all these things he's working on and all these projects. Like he literally, you could tell he had 37 plates spinning at once. But when you were talking to him, you had his full attention. So, a lot of those guys might be so fragmented in so many directions, but when he was there, he was one of the most fun guys in the room. I would put Troy in that category too. Those guys were just like, I don't know what the best duo out there is, but they were just always having a good time, but they were always introducing people. So like there's, nice. I was in there in that first weekend, but the OGs or Casey and all the people who sat at the table with him as this had pre-launch and stuff like that. I was there in January, February, but there's an even older set that was there, and we were all there together, and it was freaking awesome.
Nice. So yeah, you come across people, they're locked in, and you're like, it's just, it's encouraging to see. And then I'm sure you're hearing, about, maybe just makes you feel good that, that people are really invested in building more, and you're just kind of waiting for things to come to life that, so many people are focused on and building on. So it helps your commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stephen, absolute shout out to this guy. I guess the goat part didn't come up. I'll have to fix the formatting on this. But Stephen,
what a surprise! You'd like that to show up. Yes,
I know it does say goat. But Stephen and I, it was awesome because Scribe described it best as your pivot foot, and me, it was just like who's on your island. Like the cool thing is even within those 300 or 400 people that you hung out with, there was like, everybody had their, good things, and Polymath and English, like they've got their crew, and one of Polymath's really good friends, Jin, who was a super nice guy. Like everyone hung out with each other, but there's always those people like you're going to go back to over and over. So if you're at a party, the pivot foot, as Scribe calls it, is like you go talk to people, you kind of branch out, you meet new people, and sometimes that's easy depending on the mood you're in. Sometimes it's hard, but if you've got that pivot foot or that safety to go back to your favorite people in the space, and for me, again, it was Steven, it was Scribe, it was B-Ways. I mean, there were so many. Polymath, I always, like, whenever I saw him, just wanted to give that guy a big hug. He's such a fascinating guy. Good things. I mean, there was so many folks, and there's so many new ones I met, like this guy Avi from the West Coast. Like, just like, I think you hang out with the people that are on your frequency, you know what I mean? And like, you just keep 100%. Grabbing. Like, I met the guy, like this Ave guy, in like Wednesday morning, and that night, like because we all went to the same parties, you might take the same cab with them or not, and you see him again, it's like a reunion of an old friend you haven't seen in 20 years. So there's definitely, and we talked a lot about this, there's definitely a frequency aspect. Like you create the core with the people you vibe with the most, and then you kind of branch out, and there's a much bigger group that you just have a blast with. Like, it was a lot to digest. I drove there both ways, 10 hours. That was kind of a fun part of the trip too, but was just exhausted coming home. But now that I've digested it, it was just super cool.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a payoff, right? Because you're talking about the alignment and kind of not necessarily an attraction, but a kind of similar view of things and similar interest. And then to actually be able to connect that and make it that translation into the IRL, it's a very kind of validating thing, I suppose. Like, it kind of takes it to another level and makes it feel like a little bit more genuine than if you've only interacted virtually.
Yeah, and you build trust. And the funny thing is, like, that was 2 or 3, 12, 13-hour days of having a really good time. Oh, Saxon was another one, fellow shroom holder. The guy was just awesome. Like, and it was interesting. Like, there was definitely like partiers and depending on the groups you're in, there was definitely a lot of like extracurricular drugs and stuff like that there, which was awesome. But I'm not a huge drinker, and a lot of the people I hung with were just like super chill, and like a lot of people didn't drink at all. Not that needs to be brought up or an issue or anything, but the point was, like, it wasn't just like, Coke on a table or anything. I didn't see any of that stuff. I'm sure there was party crews, but so many of the people, we just wanted to be there and talk about Bitcoin, crypto, ordinals, and and where the world is moving.
Wow. I do have some FOMO on it.
I was going to say, I saw.
Yeah. It's like everyone was greatest. It was, I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. I myself had a little venture, to celebrate an anniversary, and went to the Land of Enchantment and, kind of got a reset on that side of things. They're, just looking at, kind of some of the artistic and spiritual things and stuff like that. So I definitely, while I have, guilt or not guilt, but I feel bad that I wasn't there because I feel like I missed out. I definitely did make the most of the time away. So we're feeling good.
But I'm glad.
I know. Thanks.
Glad you had a good trip, but you missed out. But you know what? You just each time you just build on it, and next time, like I already said, like I'm gonna grab my favorite people. We'll grab a house or like and then you can have like a home base, and then so basically create like a permanent structure pivot foot and then go out. But the next one is in Las Vegas in May. We should definitely go to that, but there'll be plenty before then, probably art shows. And the cool thing about, this is the biggest one. So you had 300, 400, 500 of us Ordinals folks all hanging, meeting, getting together. And maybe it was even 1,000. I don't know. But at these other ones, now you could go to other ones. There'll be smaller ones and be like, oh, hey, I met you at this. So it's just, over the years, you just kind of build those relationships stronger and stronger. So in sum, on the Nashville front, on the individual side, it feels good. Because what I've always said to you specifically, like back in 2017, whatever my first crash was, like you kind of like, you feel the lows and highs more alone. And even if you're two Bitcoin holders, like it's like, it's different to say we're rich, we're poor. Like it's like my bank account's bigger, my bank account's smaller. Whereas if you're in Ordinals and runes, it's so multi-layered where art is put on top of that and culture and all that stuff. So when you have a smaller tribe like that, I think it just makes the bonds that much stronger.
Yeah, that's well said, and a good kind of recap of, your takeaways from that, from a more individual or personal perspective. And then when we zoom and look at, as I say, from afar, I'm getting reports from all sorts of different, outlets about what's happening and what everything means that's going on. You had, some really big speakers, and, from Donald Trump to RFK and, kind of getting the distillation of the messaging. It's just incredible. Some of the kind of newsy things I heard, I heard the term Louisiana Purchase moment, and I heard the term currency of hope. So you start hearing these things, percolating out of, that event, and you start seeing just this whole, it's not necessarily, this might sound stupid, it's not necessarily like the gentrification of Bitcoin and crypto, but to a degree, we saw it when we went to DC, right? You started hearing them parrot out the things that we've been talking about for so long. But when you really, you have these major folks flying in, looking to, kind of align and say that they understand what they're doing, it's just really kind of fascinating, we can get into Trump's speech or, anywhere we want to start, but, that was kind of the big headline, right? Was, Donald Trump actually came and delivered an address. And from what I can tell, it was extremely well received. Like just, incredible.
I think it was. But before we go there, let's go to because you brought up two interesting points. You talked about Cynthia Lummis and RFK, who actually spoke first, both of them, and this concept of the Bitcoin reserve. So her thing, I believe his was like 4% of all Bitcoin, correct? So that's over 1 million.
Yeah, his plan is to transfer the existing 204, but then to buy, I believe it was like 550 Bitcoin per day until it hits a 4 million point, and then decide to purchase more or not. So really buying that reserve. Yeah.
So to buy day one, 550 Bitcoin a day, which is more than the daily supply of Bitcoin available. Right now we're at 450 Bitcoin is mined every day, right after the halving. So this is buying, and obviously these are RFK, even though I like him, he's probably not going to win unless something crazy happens. But he is proposing that we buy 550 Bitcoin a day till the price of Bitcoin is 4 million.
No, I think until till we have a net of 4 million in the treasury.
Oh, 4 million Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's what I
So
believe it is
basically 4 or
because
5% of the total supply. What people don't
yeah,
realize is when Bitcoin is bought with the current supply, that it doesn't go. So if buying gets linear, like let's say they bought 550 a day and nobody else bought anything, the price of Bitcoin isn't going to go up linear because there's only so much available to buy on the exchanges. I'll pull that chart up in a second, but the price
yeah,
goes up like exponentially or logarithmically if any of this stuff gets instituted.
yeah. And it's almost the same. It's almost the same blueprint that then Loomis proposed. I don't know if she spoke the same day later or the next day, but she has a bill out there for the U.S. to buy 5% of the total Bitcoin supply as well. So they're they're very similar in kind of the net of that. And I completely agree from from what you're saying. It's like, dude, if you start doing the numbers on these sort of buyers coming in looking to buy 5%, and that again, that's one government. We've already talked, for months and months about, all these different entities, countries, states, everyone looking at it. So they would even be competing against, Michigan and Wisconsin to, get the assets. So it's really a mind blowing concept to think about where we're headed for sure.
Yeah, 100%. This is one we used to pull up a lot in the early days, but this is the Bitcoin. This is just the last year. Orange is the price of Bitcoin. Obviously, in the last year, it's gone up nicely from 20 to 60, 70K. But the green is the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges, the number, if you will. And just look, I mean, look at the area under the graph to the left to over here. It's gone down by at least what, 40, 50, 60%. Like right now, the amount of Bitcoin we have on exchanges is 2.48 million Bitcoin. So it's not a lot. And, just in comparison, like this January, it was 2.72. And I don't even think we've seen the big institutions come in yet. There's a lot we haven't seen from kind of who's even capable of buying. A lot of these pension funds that there's so many banking regulations that have to happen before these ETFs can just get scooped up. But later in the show, obviously, we're going to talk about the states. Like we just keep adding to the amount of states, but we'll kind of save that. So back to RFK and Cynthia
But
Lummis.
even
Go ahead.
Yeah, but even if you go back to the chart you just showed, right? Like that's real time, right? So that includes the Mount Gox and everything, right? And that would also probably include the U.S. government they put the Silk Road money on there too. So you're seeing kind of these governments dump and move. The only way they can dump is to move it to exchanges. So that doesn't really. I just think that you looked at the Loomis proposal, what she said, and RFK, and the greatest part about it is both of them said, "Hey, we want to get let's just say close to 4 to 5% of the supply." And they all said they're going to hodl it for 20 years. So
Right.
it's not an in and out strategy. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. The at the what he's alluding to in this chart for those who are listening is the amount of Bitcoin that went on the exchange just recently kind of went up on a cliff. And you're right, because Mt. Gox has already, we know, distributed to Kraken, and we know the government's given $2 billion of the Bitcoin to custody at Coinbase. There was a lot of rumors 2 days ago that it was imminently to sell, but now we know that that was just for Coinbase, just to custody. So they're not, we've already heard that the U.S. government is not planning to sell it. People thought it was like retribution against what Trump said, and the Democrats in power were going to do this, but that's not the case at all. So yeah, the numbers actually gone up, but once the demand, I mean, it's just going to get bigger and bigger, and the amount on exchanges is going to go down. Now, everyone has a price for what they'll sell their Bitcoin at, but a lot of us holders, I don't even know what my price would be. Like if Bitcoin ripped to 350 today, would you sell some? I don't know if I would. Like, what are you going to buy?
I mean, honestly, the only way I would is if I had an IRL cash crunch or something that I needed to, tie into. But that would be last chance kitchen. Like the last thing I'd want to do is part with that at all.
Yeah, for sure. Steven's writing more awesome stuff, but this is long, so I'm just going to read it. Buying 5% of the Bitcoin supply isn't even necessary. All Cynthia Lummis needs is to convince Congress to pass legislation that can move the 5% of the Bitcoin supply currently held by the Homeland Marshals into a reserve fund. I didn't even think that their current stash, what'd you say it was, Disco? Because I just did I actually have a tweet on it. I thought it was only 200,000. Hold on, I actually have it up right here. United States government, has 210,000 Bitcoin right now. So that's actually that's an easy one to calculate. That's actually 1% of the supply. So
that was very convenient.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at math, but I'm like 21 million divided by. And here's the other thing. Like I was before the show, Steve, and if you're still listening, I was telling Disco that I'm doing a stat, because I know you and I were kind of talking about this at breakfast that morning, that the amount of Bitcoin I think someone is going to need to kind of, as this generational wealth transfer happens, it's not one Bitcoin. It's like, my theory so far is it's 0.3. It's like a third of a Bitcoin, but it's not even that. That's just if you count the number of millionaires. There's about 60 million millionaires in the world. And that's a rough number triangulated through a couple AIs and just Google searches. So, but let's just go with 60 million millionaires. There's, we've lost at least 1 million Bitcoin. So there's 20 million Bitcoin. So there's 3x millionaires to Bitcoin. If all those, a lot of those millionaires obviously probably have dabbled in Bitcoin, maybe 10%, but a lot of them haven't. So even if all of them scramble to get in, each of them would have to split, theoretically, if every Bitcoin was available, which it's not even remotely close. It's like less than 5% available, would have to split a third of a Bitcoin. That's before the pension funds, before the state of Michigan came in, before the state of Wisconsin. Oh, by the way, before Hong Kong came in. Now I'm blowing point number 5. I might as well just go to this go. Oh no, 0.4.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hold on, I'll get this. There we go. I mean, it's just absolutely insane, the amount of states and pension funds and the amount that can't even get in yet. And that's not even to take into consideration the sovereign nations. US has 204,000 Bitcoin. And if they win, even if the Democrats win, which they probably won't, they're going to have to play nice with us, because what do we know now, Disco? We know that the world's biggest super PAC in the US, whether you love them or hate them, is Fairshake. It's crypto. Like,
isn't that insane? Like, I couldn't believe that story. So yeah, Fairshake as a super PAC passed MAGA and became the largest, so AKA the most influential PAC for the US election. It's unreal.
Yeah, absolutely unreal. So I mean, all of these things are kind of, I need to, Steven, sorry, I apologize. I need to lower the font, but at least I get to put your face on there, your beautiful face. He is absolutely one of the smartest people in the room. And he was working that week, and I'm just like, everyone comes up and people who want to pitch you will be like, hey, what are you building? And my whole pitch was like, obviously we're doing the show and, I know everything constitutes building now, but I'm like, I'm not building anything. I just love being here. I love Bitcoin. I love Ordinals, and I love runes. And then of course their next sentence is like, oh great, well here's what I'm building. I'm like, easy. We're gonna, like, I have to like you first. You have to be my friend. Like, I only collect art from people that I like. And if I want to know what art to buy, I asked Stephen Miller, because he is the best art, like, analysis curator person in this entire space. But Stephen, that's enough on you for now, for at least 4 minutes. But yeah, I just, like, everything is happening at once. Like, what we didn't even talk about is that, Kamala Harris, she was in talks with the conference organizer. Obviously they're trying to do a crypto reset. The crypto reset, it's been a week now. That's not going so good. Like we in crypto were like, okay, I still don't trust you. Chokeboy 2.0, like, nothing's really changed, but she's going to have to. She cannot alienate the swing voters in swing states with crypto.
She has to, because There are, I mean, remember SAB and, Fit 21, and you saw younger Democrats go against the party and go against, Biden at that point, and actually, vote for to override the veto and all that. So for them to break party ranks, that was the early indicator that there's more of an appetite than I think people thought within some of the elements of the Democratic Party to embrace it. Granted, there's a big credibility issue right now. And I know that, her team reached out to Coinbase and Ripple and, some of the bigger players to try to have, a little bit of a, come here and let's try to get on the same page a little bit. But it's just the facts, what we've been talking about for the past, 6-7 months, that there's too many people who are too passionate and too tied to the vision of this and the inevitability of what we're seeing with the positive transformation and implementation of this technology that, now it's becoming almost geopolitical when you think about, kind of the race based on what you said earlier. If they're starting to hear us talk about it, that's what got Hong Kong to start, some of their legislators starting to say, hey, Trump's legitimately talking about, acquiring reserves and making this a real strategy for the US as a superpower. You can't tell me that every other country is not baking in the same strategies as of right now. So we're in this arms race for it, and you can't have it be partisan anymore. Like, it's just not going to age well, and it's not going to help you in swing states, not even top of the ballot, but down the ballot, when you down the ticket, when you start looking at some of these races. You start looking at Elizabeth Warren and Deaton, you start looking at one of the races in Ohio, and they're really kind of leveraging people's, response to crypto. So it's becoming more important than just, hey, I'm pro or I'm anti. And you really haven't heard much from Warren, which makes me a little nervous because, she'll probably have another fight or two left in her, a kick or two. But the other thing we haven't said was Trump's big kind of takeaway for all of us was he said Gary Gensler's out day one. Like he said, he will fire him on day one.
I think everybody's Gensler's done. Everyone's going to fire him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he was a patsy for someone else in the choke point 2.0, but obviously I don't feel sorry for him at all. But along your lines of partisan politics, there was an awesome study, and this isn't on our docket, but there was an awesome study that came out by a guy that we met, Disco, in DC, named Troy Cross. And he and a couple other folks did an awesome study, and and I'll post it on my timeline. No, I already did yesterday. I'm sorry, I forwarded. Check out my timeline. But the TLDR is that, the thinking in crypto was that everybody mostly was right, we'll call it Republican in America, or far right. And that could not be further from the truth. The actual majority of Bitcoiners are neutral politically. And I know you and I we just want a good candidate. You and I fall under that category, but neutral was a big one. The far right and left, actually, those were a little higher compared to the far right and left normies, but those were equal to each other. So there's just as many liberals as there are self-proclaimed liberals as there are Republicans. And it just goes to show you, it's not a red thing. It's not a blue thing. It's an orange thing. It's a full orange pill that it doesn't matter at all what political party you belong to, because Bitcoin, again, I know I say it every week, but Bitcoin doesn't give a shit about any of us. Bitcoin just works. And the reason that everybody is revolving around Bitcoin, what's the whole thing like? First they try and, first they ignore you, or first they laugh at you, then they ignore you, and then they try and quash you and silence and destroy you, and then they join you. And clearly, remember when we started this podcast like last September or whatever, remember, like, we were in a bear then, and we went about a month. Remember, you were like, is a bull about to happen? Like, we had those spidey senses tingling, and it was like, yeah, it is about to happen. So we knew, and it's, who knows what's going to happen with the political turmoil and maybe one party not believing an outcome or something. Hopefully it's smooth transition, whoever wins. But I think beyond that, like, I can feel the inevitable. Like, even though Bitcoin, like, it goes up in the 70s and it goes right back down the 60s, mid 60s, like, we're all like, there's only good news. Trump basically said he's going to do a reserve for it. So did RFK. Two of the three candidates have said, like, Bitcoin is going to be like the centerpiece of their presidency, yet the price just keeps staying the same. And I guess it's like, now we have to build the big normie roads. They're coming. It's institutional, and all our retail friends are going to get screwed because they're not going to get in again until it's 100,000 plus. And then they'll probably run for the hills on the first little dip, but it is what it is. We know, and the people that we know, and you just got to ride it.
So that leads me pretty well to something I've been cooking up in my head. It's not a tweet. It's not a take. It's just, I don't know. They talk about like, oh, the Democrats have to do a reset and everything like that. And, I'm thinking that Disco needs to do a little bit of reset. And I maybe would call for some other members of, X Twitter to think of this in terms of, so we've talked about what's inevitable and we're all bullish and we always end up being like, oh, so stack sats and, get into what you're into. And I feel like we need to take a little bit of time to focus not on the politics that we can't control. There's really very few actions that we can take right now that can impact our bags in a positive way. It's kind of out of our hands and in that point of inevitability. So I think I'm going to work really hard over the next few months to go back to focusing on kind of the wow and the wonder and the good that can come from these kind of turbulent times and this fast developing technology. Like, we're at a point where it's making me super bullish on art. Like, I want to see what's being created right now. What is going to be the art of these times? And I can't wait to see what brilliance comes out of kind of this madness that we're seeing from kind of a political thing. I mean, think about just that, the fight picture after the assassination attempt. Like, that's going to be around for freaking ever. That is a incredible capturing of the chaos that we're kind of just living in day to day. And I just want to know, what else will we see that's either real or performance? And most excitedly, what are these great artists right now creating that I haven't seen or experienced yet? Like, what's going to be the soundtrack to these times? What's going to be the new punk, the new graffiti, the new hip hop, the new dance movement, the new generational voice? Who's the Salinger that's going to come out of this? Who's the next Vitalik? Who's the next Cobain? And it's like, I haven't seen that really come yet. And I was in a place that was very artistic centric, for the last week. And I just had a lot of friction with it because it was focused on art that wasn't relevant to me anymore, which was traditional art. It wasn't of the moment. It was of, back, Georgia O'Keeffe times and this or that. And I'm not disparaging the impact that artistic movements and stuff have made, but I have yet to really see the kind of culmination or the output of these new tools that we have. And I'm just sitting there promising myself that I need to focus more on searching out and finding the people that are really groundbreaking and making this new change. And I think that it's going to be incredibly positive and exciting and exhilarating when we start seeing some of these things come to life. You see them with some of the artists who have already adopted, or inscriptions and stuff like that, but there's going to be more, and there's going to be, digitally native artists that are just going to blow our minds with what they come up with. So I'm trying to focus on that for like at least the next month or so, when like Congress goes into recess and we're all kind of waiting to see what happens with the election. Like, this is the time for me to go back to the point of wonder and, that beginner's mind, and be like, what can be accomplished, and what are we going to see come out of this? And who knows, maybe I'll come up with something creative and an output as well. But it just really inspired me to be like, we're in the new age, the page is turned. Like, let's see what this digital, I want to say digital, but what this next generation of art can really become.
Nice. I love disco. Like, I have a close here. Here's the disco close-up button just for those moments. Like, I love your hot takes. So no, but it's awesome. And for those in the audience who don't know, like, Disco and I grew up together, and he got into crypto in like 2021. He bought Pico Top. A lot of his friends did too, but he stuck around and a lot of people left. I got in 2014, 2015, got lucky that it just happened to be a low in the cycle, but I've been studying it. I never looked back, been studying it ever since, but I didn't have to, because I bought low, I never had to worry about like being underwater for a cycle. And you did. And you've always been in the arts. You had a music company for a long time. And, because at first I'm like, like the artists, I can introduce you to Lemonades, into Otto and to Billy Retzi, like all these awesome artists. But no, you're talking about a whole culture movement. You're talking about how's the music going to change now? Like we've already heard so many different, raps and different musical songs on Bitcoin. And most of them are trying to be funny and kitschy so they can get on like a show. But you're saying like, where is the, because I always contend that we here in crypto and certainly Ordinals runes even more so, like we've created a tribe. I think for normies out there looking for like, what's the epitome of cool now? I don't think you're finding it like in the bars and the pool halls, like with the hush puppy shoes or anything. It's here, it's online, it's virtual. You and I are older. It's not an age thing. Like the first thing you asked me when I got home was, did you feel like people were like, oh, and like, we'll let the old man go hang out with them? I'm like, it didn't, and of course I said, well, I look kind of young for my age, so I get away with shit. But how about vanity? But no, but it did. Nobody gave a crap. Maybe like, as I said, with the frequencies, like the 20 somethings would hang out more with the 20 somethings as their pivot foot and stuff. But like there was not once where I was like, oh, that person's super young or that person's super old. Now, I can't speak for the young folks, but I didn't feel that at all. I feel like Bitcoin just transcends all that, because if you know.
Yeah. And is Elden Ring, or are these games kind of the new representation of, like, I'm not sure exactly what it is yet, but I just can't wait to like really start seeing the generational impact of people playing with these tools and creating things that I couldn't fathom. It's no longer like 6 strings in the truth, or, anything like 3 chords in the truth, or,
I've
even
never heard 6 strings in the truth. I've heard 3 chords in the truth.
Yes, indeed. But, it's just like, that's what's so cool. And that's what, when you see a new movement and you feel it, basically, I think art comes out of movements, right? So you had, the frustration with the unemployment in England, and all of a sudden punk music came about and did that. So you see these things come out of that. And I just think with this insane, day to day, when we're getting different algorithms and we're having, divisiveness in your feed, and you kind of had this almost futility of like, what's the point, because they're not going to hear what I'm hearing, or they're not going to listen to what I'm listening. Art's got to spawn out of that, and I think we're just almost about to see it. And I'm going to do my best, and maybe I got to hit up Steven more on the side, or pay more attention, because it sounds like he's frontlining that. But I'm really want to kind of take my focus away from just echo chambery. There's different group chats or whatever, and it's like they're talking about things that they really can't control. Oh, maybe this is what happened, and it's like, dude, just
maybe this rune will pop if X, Y, and Z happens. And I've got a bag of runes, and I know so do you, and I hope I do think at some point that runes will go. I think when you can buy them, more, it's more fluid, whether it's on a Sex or a Dex, where you can buy them not in blocks, but much more liquid. But I think a lot of these have a chance to run, like Arsic and Billy and a whole bunch more. But I think someone made a really good point in Nashville. I think it was Scribe saying that one of the reasons that Solana did really well with like Bonk and some of those other ones is it was infrastructure and kind of utility first, and then it kind of turned into the hottest coin. Bitcoin just kind of skipped that, because Casey was like, well, BRC20 sucks, so we're going to make runes way more efficient so it doesn't choke the network with 2 transactions every time someone wants to trade. But, he built the utility, but no runes to this point really have utility. I assume at some point we'll see one that's a stable coin, maybe. I don't know. Obviously you need a frickin' whale for that. But runes may be the simplest, cleanest way on top of Bitcoin's L1 to be that. But, we'll see. I think our sick guys are still working, but Liquidium came out with something yesterday. They had an 8-ball in it, and people were like, that's it, it's Arsic. And Liquidium's like, sorry, it's not Arsic. And
sorry, folks.
So there's definitely some cope there. I do think they're building. I do wish they'd communicate a little more, but I think you and I have just kept quiet. We've just been patient on it, because I think looking at the space as a greater whole, you kind of make some bets. But if you're going to make meme coin bets, like, be prepared to lose too, because, unless it's a cabal of influencers, which we know exist out there, like with the Rug Radio guys and a lot of these ETH guys who are coming over, like, if you're not on the inside, you're probably going to get pumped, right? And you're probably going to get out Pico. You're going to be exit liquidity like I was for Cat and Sats. I mean, I've had a lot of wins, but most of my wins were just stacking real Sats and Bitcoin. So like I said, I'm going to come out with a tweet, but if you don't like even like a third of a Bitcoin, and honestly, once I do the math, I think it's going to be like 0.1 Bitcoin. So what are there, 100 billion Sats at a Bitcoin or something like that? So that would be like 10 billion or something like that. You need 10 billion Sats, and you should be set as this transfer of wealth happen. It might happen in a year. It might happen in 20 years, but just, you don't even need a full Bitcoin anymore. If you can get to one, I highly recommend it. But if you can't, I think the number is going to be way smaller, because once we get these state actors, these Goliaths coming in, these big companies, like, it's like, once you figure it out, you can't, like, once somebody at Apple, whether Tim Cook has to leave or not, like, once somebody at Apple and the finance group sees it, you can't unsee it. Like, fine, maybe you don't put all 126 billion in there, but God, put 30 or 40 or 50 billion in at least, and watch your company grow without even having to sell a product. So up only.
So let me ask you this, because it just came up, and I don't really understand the question I'm about to ask because it's being formulated as I speak. But if you're looking at it from that perspective, and it's like, a 0.1 could represent, an inordinate amount of, wealth, right? Do you think we'll just start referring it a lot more to just the amount of Sats as opposed to the point of Bitcoin?
At some point, it will have to transition to Sats. I think one of the reasons Bitcoin was not adopted quicker is because it's still in BTC. A lot of normies, you got to remember, I mean, you probably know this better than I do, they don't realize that you can buy 0.006 Bitcoin. It doesn't even, they don't know it goes to 8 decimal places, whereas the Sat is the smallest unit of Bitcoin. So now you're 8 decimal places over, right? So there's your 100 billion. And I think eventually it will. If Bitcoin goes to $1 million or $10 million, or what Michael Saylor was saying, his bull cases, wasn't it like 37 or 64? I mean, this is by 2045, right? This is like the next generation. But if it gets adopted even remotely that fast, like, multi-million-dollar Bitcoin is not out of the question, in which case we can then go to Sats. Because think about it psychologically. If you're like, I worked my ass off at the joke in this industry is like going back to being a drive-through guy at the McDonald's, like, I'm working my ass off, and if you can just save, and if you can put $100 in, and that's like 240,000 Sats. I'm just making, I don't know how many Sats that is, but it sounds a whole lot better. Be like, just keep Sats. Be like, I've got 1 million Sats. I got 1 billion Sats now. Like, that's a lot better. Whole numbers are a lot more comfortable to normies than 0.006, which you and I both know is actually not a teeny tiny amount. It's several $100s, right?
And not only whole numbers, but large quantities make you feel better too. So if you're sitting there saying you have 1 million Sats, you're like, hey, I'm covered off. I
got a milli Billy, for sure. That's why I, like, early on you were like, hey, this, like, we've got a bunch of these tokens. I'm like, yes, there's 2 trillion. You're like, oh, is that bad? Be like, yes. You always want to make sure the denominator isn't too large, right?
Yes, I remember being cautiously hopeful about like Runes Mania Minor before the happening, because I had just a huge grip. I'm like, well, if that does something, we'll be in great shape.
And it did not. A lot of them. I did meet the Runes Viking guy, and he's still building. He was super nice. He's from I think it was from Sweden or Norway. Super nice guy though. So I mean, there are people continuing to try and build out there. Rune Guardians, I know. Napoleon, it's always hard to pronounce that name, is build. Like, a lot of these guys are building. We have to see if it comes back or not. And I was saying a couple of weeks ago on one of the spaces, probably good things show that first, before runes or before ordinals have a chance to rip, it's probably going to be Bitcoin to make people feel rich there. Then runes technology is going to get a little better. Some runes will rip. Those guys will get rich. They'll want OGs like Shrooms or OMB or Node Monks or whatever they want. So I think the order is definitely some runes will pop at some point in the next year, and then ordinals will follow suit.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at with just my little take was, for the mini foreseeable future, there's not a lot that, disco can pull off, to not a lot of moves. And a lot of times I make moves just because I feel like, oh, activity will result. But at this
Yeah.
point, I think it's better to kind of refocus on the wonder and the excitement and the art, and to really kind of find that, and look at what kind of gets you excited about the space overall, instead of, trying to think you can impact something that's bigger than you.
Yeah, I mean, the more you move stuff around, and for me, for the last 10 years, the more I've bought and the more I've moved in general, I think I'd be wealthier if I just held the original Bitcoin and just kept stacking sats. In fact, I know I would be wealthier, but it is what it is. And I don't regret having the art, but people just need to know,
Yeah.
stack with all the stuff you see in your timeline. Stacking sats has to be your number one priority right now, because there's I think this is going to happen over the next 10 or 20 years, but this seismic shift and this transfer of wealth is only like this is going to be the biggest transfer of wealth I would imagine ever. Like I don't, maybe historically there was something where land changed hands from some sort of uprising, or gold was pilfered somewhere and passed out to a lot of people, but I generally, things aren't pilfered and passed to anybody. It's given to the strongest, biggest guy in the room, right? So this is the first time where we beat Silicon Valley in, most of them anyway. We beat the politicians in, we beat Wall Street in, we won. And now we get to see it play out again. Like at some point right now, we're aligned to the Larry Finks and the big institutions, but at some point we might not be. Like when they start making rules, like we need to make sure we can hold our private keys and all that stuff. So that will be a fight that we have to be, we have to be preemptive and proactive on that fight. Cause at some point, it may be too late. Look at the Patriot Act. They passed that when everybody's in panic. Like they're good at creating a huge black swan diversion over here to take more surveillance and power. And that's one I think we have to be very serious about keeping our eye on and fighting.
100%. I like the image in the middle representing the United States and the kind of proliferation of Bitcoin. When you look, we think about some of the different buckets, and how do we kind of filter through all of the news and think of what's relevant to folks, sticking to what we said before. But just over the past week, we've seen another state come in. Another state pension fund is now actively purchasing Bitcoin, for its fund, and that's the state of Michigan. We also saw Jersey City come in for their pension fund to say that they're going to start purchasing it as well. So we're just seeing this happen. And I do, people always go back to what they know before. So they're like, oh, it's an arms race, or it's this or that. But to some degree, since there is this, it goes back to the finite supply. Like, since there is a finite supply and there's increasing demand, and there's now long-term understanding of the value, it's that is what we're looking at now. It's a race, and starting to see, these different states. It must be states that are in pretty decent financial shape, and can do that and can make that play. But I think they're going to look back on this and look like legends. So it's interesting to see those stories pop out.
Yeah, and it also shows you that these bureaucrats in these states are they've been orange pilled, right? So it takes a lot. I'm on the board of my little teeny town here, and I was thinking this morning, it would be a disservice. I'm sure I'll get scoffed at, but it will be a disservice for me not to propose to put at least 10% of our assets or savings into Bitcoin. And I know they'll be like, Michigan did it, Wisconsin did it. Now New Jersey, I think it was a big city in New Jersey, did it. But
Jersey.
I know Arizona, a couple pension funds out there. Now we've got Hong Kong looking at it as a reserve strategy, like, slowly, suddenly, all at once. And I'm shocked. Like if you would put in front of me, Disco, like, I have a crystal ball. Here's the timeline of 2024 in the news and what Trump announced, what RFK announced, and Kamala Harris may be going on, and then these states doing it. And you'd be like, okay, at the beginning of the year, Bitcoin was at 62,000. What do you think it's going to be by July 31st? And I'd be like, 130? I don't know. And it's still 66,000. Now we know the Mt. Gox FUD is finally going to be over. They haven't doled it all out. I don't know what takes them so long. It's like, just fucking pass it out.
Just send it.
Yeah, just send it and get it over with. Because Kraken was supposed to only have 14 days, but I don't even know if they've moved there. So the Mt. Gox money, I don't think it's not. We know that a third is moved, but less than that has actually like been sold on the marketplace. But to me, that's the last batch of FUD. But I guess it tells you one of two things, like that it's being manipulated at the biggest whale influencer level, which is obviously presidents, state actors, Wall Street, the Larry Finks. Like, it has been fully co-opted because, someone I was talking to at the conference are like, dude, we can't move the needle. And where I disagree with him, though, is a bunch of us together can. But his point was it's being manipulated in the billions of dollars. Those are the whales that can collude, whether they are or not, who knows, but they can collude to make Bitcoin go up and down, being a over $1 trillion asset. Now 20 of us obviously can't make a dent, but all of us can. I just saw a stat that 51% of Bitcoin is owned by individuals. So the state actors have big swaths, but we still own, for at least for now, the majority. And obviously even through the BlackRocks, we own it, but they custody it. So it gets gray there, right? Not your keys, not your crypto. So
yeah. And then you saw that Russia is making moves to start utilizing crypto officially again. They passed a legislation for being able to do international Bitcoin payments as well as to start mining again. So big changes there. They haven't officially allowed it within the state, but I would assume that might be coming as well. So it's all just, again, it's just this overall adoption story. You're kind of seeing the pipes being laid underneath it. And we kind of have that, not necessarily insider, but what's so cool about it is you have such a higher level of transparency now just because of the nature of, what we're able to see and how it's happening. So we're going to start seeing more and more disclosures, I assume, of companies that are doing this or that. I know Marathon Digital, they just bought another 100 million in Bitcoin, not 100 million. They bought 100 million in Bitcoin. So they're up to like 20,000 Bitcoin. And that's another example of what we talked about in the previous show of like, how are you a good financial steward of your, corporation if you're not allocating something to this? It's funny, kind of a tale to what you said about how you almost felt like you would not be doing a disservice to your town by not advocating to purchase it. I was talking to my son last night, and he's part of this conservation group for jazz and for the jazz arts. And I went to something that was spectacular. I was like, I might offer to help the board and get involved. And he's like, that's fine, but don't push them onto crypto, dude. I'm like, how did you know I would? He's like, you're going to start saying, well, why don't you, do this?
Yeah,
all right,
you're going to embarrass me, Dad. But you don't have to do 100%, but do some of it, because we both know if this does rip, if Bitcoin goes to, like, let's say my little town gets 0.1 or 0.2 Bitcoin, like barely nothing. Yeah. In 10 years, they might be able to literally be like a self-sovereign town where they already have a stockpile and they don't even have to worry about raising these revenues or not, because you can make so much more from this. Now, it's a gamble, and a small town obviously probably wouldn't do 100% of it. If it was my small town, I don't know if I do 100, because then you'd have the pitchforks after you, and then you'd have to move. And Blutoshi,
the Blutopolis.
Blutoshi likes his little compound too much, but just some of it. But the early you are in this adoption cycle, whether you're a state, company, sovereign, the earlier you are, the more like in 20, 30 years, like you can make way different decisions about city planning and, company planning, because you might be like, we're making so much more. You'll just go to the Bitcoin standard and be like, why are we working? We just need to buy more Bitcoin with what we have, and that's going to grow faster than we can generate revenue.
So how much better, I said earlier when we started the show about the, kind of cathartic nature for doing the show, but how much better as a individual do you feel by being early and holding, some stockpile of Bitcoin as just an individual? You're talking about, it'd be smart for a town to get 0.1 or whatever. So if you have 0.1, 0.5 or whatever for yourself and for your family, you should be feeling pretty good, just based on, kind of the currents that we're seeing out there. So, I don't want to pat everyone on the back, but when you start seeing, divergent takes and everything like that, it's like really zoom back out and think about the fact that you already have a seat in the theater, and you should be pretty happy that you had the foresight to do it. So kudos to everyone who has, kind of taken the pill and taken that next action step to acquire some.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess I'd throw it right back at you, but to me, it feels great because, I do own a small company and I love it. But as I get older, I want to do more of what I love doing, which is talking to you on the show, doing spaces with Scribe and Steven, and just following my passions. And when I feel like going on a walk with my dog or my wife or my kids or whatever, or playing golf or whatever your hobby or activity is, you can do more of that. I mean, the coolest thing is when you have a society of people that, kind of made a bet and they bet on themselves, and then they have the freedom to not be paycheck to paycheck anymore. That's when, like you were talking about, what's the art going to be? That's when the art is going to be off the charts, because it's going to be people who have finally felt a freedom, and they're not under the oppression of what none of us understood with economics, because you were never really taught this, is this inflation. The silent tax and the silent theft is way more insidious than any of us had previously thought. And now we have an exit ramp, and it feels really good.
Yeah, 100%. I noticed a shark.
Yeah, so Solana, this one's worth mentioning. It's kind of an honorable mention for this week, but Solana's it's their, like, a part of their chain did more daily than ETH. I believe it was Pump Fun. So Pump Fun, all the degen meme coins on Solana, did more in revenue than the entire ETH chain did. It was either yesterday or last week. I think it was yesterday. So, I will say I am the first one I made fun of Solana, and it does still go down, and I still make fun of it. I'm not going to buy my NFTs on there, because when things go down, I don't believe in IPFS. I don't believe in Arweave. I only believe in Bitcoin and having things inscribed on sats immutably forever. But you cannot ignore Solana. Obviously Solana meme coins are kicking Bitcoin's meme coins ass. There's over 1 million of them, probably 2 million by now. 1 million was the number last week. And Solana is eating Ethereum's lunch. It just passed BNB, I believe, is the number 4 coin. So it doesn't matter what the hell I think about it and what my biases were, because my biases came from ETH and being a crypto punk, and now I'm in the ordinal space. And when we ripped, so did Solana. We ripped with ordinals, they ripped with meme coins, and our ordinals came, our runes and meme coins came later. But you got to tip the hat to Solana, and it makes me. I'm thinking very hard about, maybe I'm not gonna get rid of all my validators on ETH, but I'm tempted to get rid of at least one or my CryptoPunk, and maybe put it over in Solana. I've already put a bag over there from early in our show when we saw it ripping, and I was like, I'm not missing out on this. And we didn't. We caught we didn't catch it from the beginning at like when it was super down bad, but we caught it pretty early, and now it's still way up. So yeah, I think Solana, if they keep going at this rate, I think they have room to rip, and they've got partnerships with like Stripe it's I know it's
Yeah.
nothing in this world's a no brainer, and Bitcoin and stacking Sats is number one, but Solana's proven to stick around. I feel like it's held very centrally, and it's hard to be a validator because you need very powerful machines to do it. So I don't love all the architecture, but it's getting adopted, and adoption trumps whatever I think about it going down and stuff like that. It's a high, it has a higher risk profile because of that, but it can't be ignored.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, another theme that we've talked about, which is, not necessarily, graduating classes or freshman classes or people coming in, but, a lot of the newer people that have come in, on this cycle entered through Solana, and they're probably sitting there like, why would I go somewhere else and pay this or wait for this or do this or that? So you have kind of, your graduating class kind of ethos, like most of the folks that have been in since maybe 16 or more, like, I'm happy to pay a little bit more and wait a little bit more to have something, inscribed and go through the process with Bitcoin. But you have, other people who would be like, dude, why would I do that? That's so annoying. Like, what are we doing? I'm waiting forever. And it's really, just kind of how you came in. And I definitely think that it represents kind of the next wave of, a different generation of folks in there. I don't know the X's and O's. I see a lot of stats on, volumes and this or that. And I assume that a lot of it's kind of, flipping around and just a lot of high frequency stuff. So I don't know. We always say, or you always say, a good chain is a busy chain, but you want to make sure that that activity is sound, right? And you want to make sure that it's doing some fundamental things.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you just look at, to your point, like, here is just NFTs, and obviously this doesn't count the meme coins, which is actually way bigger on Solana. But look at the amount of people coming in the last 7 days. So there was 344,000 buyers of Solana NFTs in some capacity. Bitcoin had 38,000, 39,000, and Ethereum had 52,000. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are kind of similar in their ecosystems, definitely smaller, but Solana is the entry gateway drug. And if you come into the entry gateway, sometimes, like, you were the one who called me out on this a couple months ago. Like, just because I call it the mother chain, it's the mother chain to me. To new people, they're like, Solana transactions are cheaper, so it's a whole different, like, ecosystem. But the younger folks, if I was younger and I'd never been into any of it, I'd probably be Solana too.
Yeah, I was just moving my head because I was looking at that chart, because do you think that you have to count, the roll-ups towards Ethereum, right? So you did see, Polygon had 142,000. So if you start adding those together, the immutable,
Yeah,
there's a
true.
little, you have to give some credit to the L2s for
Sure.
Ethereum if you're looking at that overall, I guess is the only point I'd
Yeah,
make on that.
I would never trade NFTs on L2s. I guess why I don't look at it, but you're right. That's absolutely correct. It's about the ecosystem. Not all of these roll up into Ethereum, which Blutoshi doesn't like from a validator standpoint. But yeah, the ETH
Right.
ecosystem is still healthy, but Solana definitely can't be ignored. So of your 100% pie allocation, if I'm 80, 10, or maybe like 75, 15, 5 or something, whatever. I don't know if that is 100, but I would probably put Solana closer to ETH now. And I never thought there would be the day where I said that. And who knows, maybe this is zigging when I should be just holding and letting Ethereum have its day. But remember, Ethereum just lost. Ethereum ETF came out last Tuesday, right? Or was that 2 Tuesdays ago? It's only been a week or two, and their net inflows outflows, it's outflow 480 million, and I assume a lot of that came out of Grayscale, because how can you be negative on things that are brand new? But negative half a billion is not a good start to that's not a good start to anything to me. So the ETH ETF, I didn't buy it, whereas the Bitcoin ETF from my retirement accounts I did. So I'm not super bullish there, but maybe it's for all the same reasons before, that I don't think the ETH ecosystem is getting used enough, and I don't think the innovation is happening there anymore.
Yeah, but to be fair, there was a shakeout period where you almost benefited by not getting in week one or day one on the Bitcoin rollout. So I think that you got to give it more time to kind of shake out. It's obviously not trending on the scale of, the impact of the Bitcoin, but
Right.
as a standalone, it could, if you didn't have to compare it to that monster of a success story, it may be doing okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
So the only last
Oh,
piece we have before we go, this one's kind of funny, but the state of California DMV drivers the Department of Driver Motor Vehicles is tokenizing the titles onto the Avalanche chain, correct?
yeah, 42 million car titles are getting tokenized on Avalanche. And first of all, if there's ever been, and this is what I'm so excited about with it, right? Like, if there's ever been an organization or operation in need of, complete just or innovation and ground up, it's the freaking DMV. I don't think anyone's super bullish on the current practices and interface. So that alone, that's exciting to see that
No.
they're looking at it, but then to see them go, and it kind of is one of those realizations of the, kind of tokenization and the real world assets that when I first got in was so intriguing to me. I was like, oh wait, you can use it this way or that. So to see it come to life in the largest state and to see it actually happen is fascinating. My question on it is, so if it's on Avalanche, do you think that holding Avalanche, you would see a uptick in this if it then goes to all the different states? Or are we just seeing like different chains being utilized for completely distinctive purposes? Like, that's what I'm trying to kind of look through. That was the big thing. It's like, okay, it's Avalanche. So is Avalanche going to look like they're more, governmental focused and, focus on that? And then as a holder, are they going to get, contracts and stuff through the states to them, and how would that impact holders down the kind of pipeline is my big question.
Yeah, I mean, any big news is obviously going to move a chain. I haven't pulled up CoinGecko. I guess I'm focusing mainly on Bitcoin, Ordinals, runes for my investments. Obviously, I'm still in Ethereum and talked about Solana. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole I want to go. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I'll pull up CoinGecko while we're talking, but I can't imagine it didn't positively affect Avalanche. It's down today, but let's just look in the last.
Yeah, I don't.
So here's Avalanche, but here let's look. 7 day. Where are you?
On the top.
Top. There we go. Thank you. So the 1 month. So it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
24 hours. Yeah. I guess it went up a little, but no, and actually in 7 days it's gone down. So
I know.
the impact wasn't great. So I guess you'd have to judge it chain by chain. I believe Avalanche is just basically, it's like a copy of ETH. It's kind of very similar to that, but I don't know. The reason we brought this into the show at the end is because, Larry Fink talks about tokenizing the world. I know, Disco, you're like, my God, like now that Solana, like the SEC en masse is just like all of these different tokens are not being considered securities. Solana is the only one that pops up to me at the top of my head, but I think Avalanche might've been one of them. There's like 5 or 6, and you were like, well, how do we front run this and find the things? No, but it's a good call. Like, is Uniswap, if they flip that switch on, it might be too late because there's so many copy pastas now that are cheaper, like the Cow one and Sushi Swap. But if Uniswap flipped on that switch, would owning Unitoken, would we be able to get, that's the holy grail, right? Where we're
Right.
holders of the coin. It's not on the stock market, and we don't even have to look at the stock price because we're getting literal annuities for what these tokens are. And that's where everything needs to go. And you were the one, because, I was in Nashville, or Nash Vegas, I guess we'll call it, but meeting people, really not paying attention to the news at all. And you were already thinking about that. You're like, this could be huge. And I think you're right. It's just a matter of like, how long is this going to take? And, I don't have a ton of faith that the regulators and government aren't still going to completely screw it up and make it like, because I mean, if Azuki could have just passed to the shareholders and didn't do that dumbass elemental crappy launch that they did, and they were doing what they're doing now with like cartoons and stuff, and we could get some of the annuities from that in some form of token that has value, like ETH or Solana or Bitcoin, preferably, then I would still be bullish. But the fact that you still can't, it's not their fault, but it doesn't make me bullish yet. And you're saying, well, front run some of these. That's a high risk thing so far. That will probably change over time, though.
Yeah, but I hear you, but I would counter just to a degree. We also have talked about how we're holding, speculative bags of runes, and we have more of a roadmap and more transparency on, what Uniswap does. Or so I'm not saying that it's a layup or anything and not financial advice, but it's something I think I want to, kind of explore a little bit more and maybe have some exposure to moving
Oh,
forward.
100%. And it's a great thought. Yeah, it's a great thought. And I think that's what keeps us going in this space. And again, we always joke about the rabbit holes. Like Bitcoiners at that conference they probably have 20 rabbit holes that they can go down and have conversations, but we ordinals, runesers, and ETH people and people pay attention to Solana and other crypto, we have like 180 rabbit holes. It's so nuanced, and that's why we do this show. We tie these fabrics together. We bring the stories to you, and we create a much bigger mosaic because everything is interconnected.
Totally. So we do this show for entertainment purposes. Nothing is designed to be financial advice. We encourage you to do your own research and make sure that you protect yourself from any liabilities or exposures. So be smart out there, enjoy enjoy the environment, have fun and learn and connect with the community. And I appreciate everyone taking their time this week and look forward to being back next week.
Yep. Love doing the show with you, Disco. And everybody listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because again, we know that X isn't currently the place where you're just going to sit and watch a video, because then I don't even think you can scroll.
No, you can't multitask.
Yeah. So just watching, we get it, but we know we're skating where the puck is going. But we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Listen to us or watch us on YouTube if you like to see the charts and stuff. Amazon Music, and there's a million others. It's distributed everywhere. RSS feeds. So follow us, like it, comment on it. Tell us what you want to talk about. If you have an interesting idea for the show, we love interviewing people. I love asking questions. I will dive deeper than you are probably even used to, because if I'm curious and if Disco's curious, it will be an interesting show. So with that, everybody, thank you. Take care. And we will see you next week.
Thanks.